Well, welcome to Arty Metal. So what I got here are a whole lot of hooks that I picked up from the fabricators, and I'm trying to work out what to do with them. They're just too beautiful to let go in a metal bin. They have one challenge or problem. They have these very pointy tops to them, and we can't let it stay like that because it's going to hurt someone. So what I thought I'd do, this is another piece of scrap that I got from the fabricator bin. I'm going to cut off these and then weld them onto these sharp points. So that's stage one. So I've been able to weld on these little bits, and that will take away the sharp point. So I've welded top and bottom. Now I'm going to weld the sides. So as you can see, I'm setting it up and I'll be able to weld in there. It's just an easier way to do it. So here we have the welded portion. So it looks like it belongs. It's probably a complex way of doing it. You know, if I had the money, I'd get the laser cutters to cut it out exactly this way. But now I'm going to flip it round to the other side and do the weld on the other side. So this is our piece now, with the little top thing welded on. Looks a bit snaky to me. Today we are just doing an abstract work. I've got some pieces here. And you may remember last time I put these little things on them. Just so they weren't sharp. What I've had to do is make sure all the edges aren't sharp, just with the grinding wheel. And I put the first one on. Now the first one, in some ways it's the hardest and in some ways it's the easiest. It's the hardest because the metal isn't warm, and the weld never flows as well when the metal's not warm. And also you've got to try and work out what current to use, because it's kind of thicker metal than what I usually use, and it takes a bit of fiddling. Now it's the easiest in terms of, because there's nothing else on there, I'm eventually going to weld these, two more of these on, but because there's nothing on there, I can move it around a bit. I can get the grinder in quite easily and clear up any mess ups. I've gone about this in the usual sort of way. I put a tack weld here, a tack weld there, and then I've put a tack weld on the other side, a tack weld on the other side. I've also moved it so it will be straight, and then I've welded across here. Now it's not the best weld. I've ground it back a bit, and I'm going to do it again. The thing I've got to be careful of, you might notice it's, because the temperature is fairly high, it's biting a bit into here. So I've got to be very careful that that doesn't happen. So I've ground back the first weld there. In some ways it's a lot easier with thicker metal, because in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder. With the thicker metal, if it does burn in a bit into the base metal, you can grind that out. With thinner metal, it's harder to grind that out without going through, but the thicker metal takes a bit more to heat up, and that makes it a bit harder to weld. So I'm going to put the second strand in, and what I'm going to do first is just tack welds as per normal. Make sure that the metal is actually flat on its metal base. Now I'm looking at this and it's quite straight. Oops. If it wasn't straight, I could bend it one side or the other and then just weld to try and straighten it up. So as you can see, I've got my 2 tack welds in, and now I'm going to attempt to weld along here. Well, as you can see, I've made a bit of a mess here. What I'm going to do is brush it and hammer it and redo it. Before I do that, I'm going to do the other side first. I don't want too much heat going to one side because that will unstraighten it or bend it. The way you manipulate heat in welding is very important. So this weld that I'm going back to correct, I've actually put a bit of a slope down and a slope to the left. And I've missed a bit under here, so if I put the slope to the left, the weld will sort of roll into there. So that's reasonably neat and tidy now. You've got to be careful not to grind too much off, or else the whole thing will snap apart. So remember what I said about being able to get the welder in case of a mess up? So, not that that was my intention to position it so I could get the welder in. So this is the final piece. Sometimes what I will do is drill big holes in the base, enough for getting a peg through to kind of further stabilize it on the ground, but this time I forgot.